Hello, my name is Shelby Knoll, and today I will be giving a presentation on teaching exceptional students along with universal design learning as well as differentiated instruction. So it is basically going to be into three different categories, which involve social, cognitive, intellectual, and academic characteristics. So let's talk about universal design for learning. What exactly is it? It is short for UDL, and it is the application of principles to the design of curricular and instructional materials to provide students across a wide range of abilities and from a variety of backgrounds with access to academic content. So basically, it's a way of thinking that helps give all students an equal opportunity to succeed in a class that they are doing. So what are the principles of UDL? Well, they provide multiple means of engagement, action and engagement, and representation. Providing multiple means of engagement is how material takes advantage of student interest and motivations for student learning. Providing multiple means of action and engagement is ways material can provide alternative ways for students to show their knowledge. And providing multiple means of representation refers to the materials that teachers use to represent the content that they are asking their students to learn. Learning facilitating progress for UDL. Teachers can achieve universal design in representing content when they use multiple formats to deliver content. Examples would be PowerPoints, role-playing, or even computer-mediated instruction. How can you apply UDL principles? Well, it all depends on the disability and the individual. So the application of UDL is different for each disability, but it is also different for each child individually. So for children with learning disabilities, UDL has advanced graphic organizers that are a useful tool when wanting to achieve success in meeting curriculum standards. Now we get into differentiated instruction. Differentiated instruction involves using different strategies such as flexible student instructional grouping, learning stations and learning centers, and having two educators in the same class. Why is differentiated instruction important? Well, it ensures maximum student growth and success. So it is a logical partner of UDL. Differentiated instruction can be customized to a small group of students who learn the same way. The principles of differentiated learning should apply to meet the needs of all students in the classroom. These include ADHD, learning disabilities, communication disorders, and emotional and behavior disorders. So in the classroom, differentiated curricular content and instructional processes requirements as well as assessment practices can promote success in the curriculum. An example could be providing a visual example alongside the oral instructions. Another good example would be using gestural, verbal, or visual cues. So let's talk about communication disorders and the UDL possibilities that can be applied. Communication disorders can relate to the components of the individual affected, so it involves speech and language. To assist these students with communication disorders that can affect their social, emotional, and academic development, we can change the format we are relating to the information with graphic organizers control vocabulary. We can also allow visual demonstrations such as PowerPoints. Moving into emotional and behavior disorders. Individuals with emotional disorders may experience multiple diagnoses in one. Those can include anxiety, depression, bullying, ODD conduct disorder, trauma, stress-related disorders, and schizophrenia. Those individuals with behavior disorders may experience both internalizing and externalizing behaviors. And these include being antisocial, having depression, anxiety, obsessions, and compulsions. They can be aggressive, act out, and be non-compliant. Academically, individuals with emotional behavior disorders may be gifted or have an intellectual disability. But most have an IQ in the lower average range, so it doesn't really affect them. The UDL for emotional behavior disorders are relate to using technology to self-regulate behavior. Moving into attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD for short. There are 3 types, which include predominantly inattentive type, predominantly hyperactive impulsive type, and combined type. The combined type has the characteristics of the other 2 types. ADHD is classified as a chronic condition that affects millions of children and often carries on to adulthood. ADHD can bring in persistent problems well into adulthood, differently sustaining attention hyperactivity impulsive behavior. It causes behavioral and social challenges for those individuals with ADHD intellectually and academically. They are equally as likely to be identified as gifted as typical students, so not as a huge of a difference. UDL for these students will have seating modifications, lighting and auditory modifications, as well as teaching these students organizational and goal-setting skills, allowing these students more time to finish tests, and allowing them to get up and move periodically, which will really help their learning abilities. So some other disorders include intellectual disability. This involves problems with general mental abilities that affect functioning in 2 areas, which are intellectual functioning and adaptive functioning. Intellectual functioning is activities of daily life such as communication and independent living. Intellectual functioning involves learning, problem solving, and judgment. So for UDL, being specific and concrete, providing immediate feedback, emphasizing students' strengths, positive feedback, longer breaks, and teaching adaptive behavior skills are the most beneficial for students. Moving into autism. What is it? It is a developmental disability resulting in and characterized by persistent impairments in social interactions, social communication, and stereotyped or repetitive movements, including flexibility in routines or patterns. It is defined as being compromised. They may have social impairments as well as restrictive behaviors, difficulty with communication, maintaining relationships, and understanding nonverbal communication, such as body language and facial expressions. Autism can present itself in different levels of intelligence, aligning with behaviors that can vary from aggressive, self-harming, tantrums, property damage. And for UDL, positive support strategies, keyword strategies, letter strategies are the most beneficial to the learning process. Moving into traumatic brain injury. This happens when a person's brain is hit with external physical force. It causes impaired functioning in one or more areas. It affects educational performance and can be open or closed. So a child with a brain injury may experience learning, communication, emotional, and physical changes, along with memory and functions. These children may experience problems in planning, problem solving, and abstract reasoning. We also have to consider the child's age when the traumatic brain injury occurred. The UDL for traumatic brain injury is all about how the teacher presents the information. Instructional pacing is beneficial to children with traumatic brain injury. It has 5 parts, which are appropriate instructional pacing, frequent student responses, adequate processing time, monitoring responses, and frequent feedback. Moving into hearing loss. So hearing loss is categorized as deaf and hard of hearing students. Hearing loss and impairments have 2 categories. They are academic achievements of students with learning impairments dependent on the individual's characteristics as well as their parents' characteristics. Students with hearing loss may encounter communication difficulties due to the difficulty with oral language. The four factors that affect students with hearing loss are social and emotional development, which is parent and parent-child interaction, peers, as well as teachers who have fundamental role with the child's development. So a social presence involves cues. Children who are deaf can also feel isolated or lonely, and this is because their peers may not know how to interact with them because they don't know ASL or know how to communicate with them. UDL for children with hearing loss includes sound field and amplification systems to present content for students. Visual graphic organizers, ASL interpreters, and closed captioning devices are all very helpful. Moving into blindness and visual impairment. As you can imagine, this could interfere with a student's academics. Some individuals with legal blindness do have some vision, but there is a low percentage of those who see nothing. Students with visual impairments are classified into three categories, which are low vision, functionally blind, and totally blind. For these students, we would want to use Braille, audio, or other technologies. These students with visual impairments may need additional support in order to be successful in the Gen Ed class. For the UDL for these students, which include using kinesthetic approach when reading picture books, we would want to have books that have texture. This would allow the individual to feel the experience like a child would who sees the experience in the book. We could also use magnification devices and reader devices so the individual could hear the story or instruction. Large print formats are also useful, as well as computers, which are great accommodations for individuals who have visual impairments. Thank you for listening.